to We're Talking Shift, the podcast where we talk shift because the antidote to feeling stuck and leveling up begins in our minds with a shift in our thinking. Well, it has been a long time. One hot minute, a whole bunch of hot minutes actually, since I've been on. But I'm back, and I am very excited to introduce my new co-host, Lauren Young. I'm really excited for this partnership. I think it's going to be fun, and she's going to bring a lot to the show, you guys. But today, Lauren and I, just to dive in, are going to talk about relationships, specifically deal breakers in relationships. I think we can all reflect back to some earlier relationships in our lives that are no longer in our lives and think, oh, I should have recognized that. I should have saw that as a red flag. So we're going to dive into that. But before we jump in, I really want to share a little bit about, well, just who Lauren is and how this whole co-hosting situation came about. Before I hand it off to Lauren, though, I do want to acknowledge that Lauren really gets credit for this because I had been on hiatus, as you may have noticed, for quite a while. I had to prioritize some other projects, and I was wanting to get back to the podcast, but I just hadn't found quite the right pathway yet or time. And then I got this wonderful pitch from Lauren. She had a great idea. And we explored it, and well, here we are, off to the races. So Lauren, I would love for you to share a little bit about who you are and what sparked your idea.
Well, Loree, while I appreciate the credit, I obviously have to turn that around and give the credit right back to you because you have been coaching me personally since about 2020, but you're kind of a ninja in this industry. You've been a life coach for a very long time. And I've found over the course of working together, you've given me so much wisdom and things that I've been able to pass along to others in my life. And of course, the We're Talking Shift podcast was on my rotation for quite some time. And so selfishly, I really missed the podcast. And so that's why I decided to reach out to you and say, hey, what do I need to do to get this show back on the air? So that's kind of how we ended up where we are. But as for me, I am a mother of twins. I have navigated through our coaching sessions, but changes in my career. I've been a journalist really for a very long time, but a television journalist somewhat recently. I have made a lot of health shifts and shifts in my relationship status. And I'm really eager to be here with you on We're Talking Shift.
Wow. Yeah, you have been on a journey, so I'm glad you brought that up because yes, everyone, we've known each other for a while now. I've worked with Lauren for a good portion of the last 4 or 5 years, and she has been on an incredible journey. She's done some amazing things from where we started out to where she's landed now. So it'll be fun to share some of that journey as we go through. A little bit today and just as we move forward. So you ready to talk about deal breakers in relationships? Because I know.
Am I ever?
Right. So, yeah, I like it. I like how you initially brought it up in a email saying, what is a deal breaker and something about, your perspective of catching the ick. And I was like, the ick. That's an interesting way to put it. So yes, let's talk about that. Do you feel like you had deal breakers that?
I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
Yes, we've all caught the ick. And even if you didn't realize something was a deal breaker, I think once you catch the ick, as we say, and you realize there's no coming back from this in this relationship, now you know a new deal breaker of yours. So I think that for me, I'm in my mid-30s now, and I am in a newer and more mature relationship. But I was, for my 20s, I was in a marriage. And so I think the deal breakers that I thought were important in my 20s are that the whole perspective has changed now that I'm in my 30s. And I wonder if a lot of people catch the ick when it's too late, or don't realize what their deal breakers are and just need a little coaching through what we need to be looking for and what are things to actually avoid. When I was a little bit younger, a deal breaker for me might have been if he's not 6 feet tall, but that's not a good deal breaker. So we need some perspective,
Right,
Loree.
right. That one might fall into the slightly superficial category, right? Yeah, yeah.
That's a
It,
preference,
it,
not a deal
yeah,
breaker.
exactly. Yeah, you would hate to have thought you turned away like the love of your life because he came in an inch too short. I mean, so
It turns out the love of my life is like 5'10". So it is what it is, and that's just fine. That's my new
there you
preference.
go. I love it. Love what you have. That's a really good state of mind to move through life in with regards to a lot of things. But anyway, so well, I have a list of what I feel are some deal breakers that a person should be wary of and watching out for. Some of these are pretty obvious. I'll kind of start going through them, and hey, if any of these apply to you, feel free to jump in and say, oh yeah, I had that experience. All right, so the first one is pretty obvious. Naturally, if there is any kind of abuse, that is a deal breaker. Whether it's emotional or physical or verbal, it's a major red flag, clearly. And it might be just, the obvious of physical stuff, but the emotional manipulation, like, belittling, trying to control a person's behavior. And the thing is, those abusive patterns tend to escalate over time. They don't usually go away. They intensify and get worse and become more frequent. So anything around that is something to clearly pay attention to, and that's something that you really need that the other person to go get some professional help. You're not going to be able to fix that person. You can't fix that person that's in that pattern, and it's not going to get better. It won't change when you get married. That's all nonsense. So you kind of just got to leave them to sort out their stuff. All right.
Absolutely. To piggyback on that thought, Loree, I feel like as a friend and a sister and a person involved in other people's lives to some degree, I would say another red flag to be looking for is when the people around you point things out. Maybe you're blind to
Sure.
them, but people aren't going to speak up and point out abuse unless they truly see it or think they see
Yeah.
it. So, definitely, I would say listen to other people who share perspectives. It can be hard because when you're in a relationship and you feel like you're in a good place with that person, you don't necessarily want the interference from somebody else, but there's a reason that friend is speaking up for you in that
Yeah, that's an
situation.
amazingly insightful point, because we don't want to see what we don't want to see, number one. And yeah, if somebody is seeing something, then at least be open to what they're saying. Be willing to listen and consider, because we do, as you pointed out, we all have blind spots, and we tend to want to ignore the faults, especially earlier on in a relationship. We don't really even see the faults, or we don't mind them. We're so focused on, and enamored with everything that you like so much or love about this person, that you have these, it'll be okay. I'll give him a pass or her a pass on whatever the thing is. So that's a really good point. The next one, again, kind of obvious. A lot of these are really pretty obvious, but to the point we just made, sometimes the blind.
We need to hear it from someone else sometime.
We do. But clearly, if you're seeing things that would qualify as dishonest, a lack of trust, if somebody is consistently lying, deceitful, if they're withholding important information from you, that really is going to undermine any foundation of trust, which is obviously essential, critically important for a healthy relationship. But once that's repeatedly broken, if it's a pattern, it's pretty difficult to rebuild. So if you're seeing that your partner, consistently is being deceitful, then that's clearly should be a deal breaker.
I am going to go you one further on this. You only have to deceive me one time, honey, and we are done here. I don't want to be with someone who even has the thought in his mind that he needs to be lying or hiding things. I don't like that. I'm not going to stand for that. If you're not prepared to be in a relationship, that's when you're going to deceive or tell a mistruth or conceal information. And at that point, I just don't have time for you anymore. And maybe this is just, coming out of a situation where I did really put in a lot of time and effort to making something work that ultimately did not work. And now I'm in a better place and in a different relationship where those things just don't exist. I'm not willing to go back. We're not doing that anymore.
Yeah. So you learned. So you did maybe experience that in the prior relationship.
Oh, for
And you,
sure. I think we've all experienced that. I think that until you're in like one relationship where you see all the things wrong with the ones before, you just don't see it.
right.
So, yeah, there will be no
Yeah.
deception
Good.
on my
Good.
watch. We're not doing
I,
that.
as your coach, am very happy to hear that. All right. So the next one, which sort of tags into abuse a little bit, is if the partner is got a need to control your behavior, or they're very possessive. So somebody that's excessively jealous, if they're monitoring your actions, if they're trying to even, isolate you a little bit from friends or family, they're trying to make decisions for you. Clearly, that's another run the other way. It's so disrespectful and it's manipulative, and clearly that is not coming from a healthy place, and you can't build a safe and healthy relationship on that. So how about, oh, go ahead.
Something you have kind of pointed out here is that there are different types of abuse. And I think it's important for people to learn that and start to define these things, because I would say 10 years ago, even, we didn't know what financial abuse was, or manipulative control, or even weaponized incompetence. And while some of these things I can hear an argument like, is that to be labeled abuse? I don't know. To me, they're all deal breakers. And I think that being able to define what those things are, you don't feel uneasy if you're comfortable with your partner. You feel uneasy if you're being controlled, whether you see it that way or not. And so, yeah, I think as you were saying about abuse, let's define these things. Let's label these things and talk about why we feel that way. Because if the root of that feeling is somebody else, maybe that's a deal breaker.
Yeah. Excellent point. I mean, because those are forms of manipulation, right? And any form of being manipulated by someone, it, that is a form of abuse. It's not the same as the very obvious, direct, violent type of abuse, but it's still a form of abuse when someone's trying to manipulate you. So, yeah, we have to recognize all these different variances, but they all boil down to the same thing. So, next on my list would be poor communication. Clearly, if you are in a relationship, right?
I'm guilty as charged.
Yeah. Well, again, we've probably, a lot of us have been there, as we've been, early on in relationships and trying to navigate, how to do this right, how to do it well. And, your ability to have open and honest and respectful communication, so much of that comes from what was modeled for you as you were growing up in your household. If you saw really positive ways of that, demonstrated to you, you're more likely to have some of those skills. But a lot of people did not have that modeled for them. And therefore, the skills they have can be pretty limited, or destructive even, because if they're trying to avoid the difficult conversations because you don't want to rock the boat, that's not gonna bode well. You have to talk about things. People can grow up becoming seeing somebody, a parent becoming very defensive or shutting down, and then they think, oh, that's normal. That's what you do when you don't like what is being brought up. But obviously, the more the more poorly the communication skills are, the more you're going to have unresolved conflicts, and then resentment is going to build up. And trust me, that doesn't go anywhere. It just keeps building up. So it's an obvious one again, but it's amazing how many people refuse to work on it.
Let me ask you this. You're talking about how it had been modeled for people. And my parents obviously communicate well. They are 35 or so years married at this point, and they seem to understand each other very well. But it was never modeled. We were very much, we were the children, and there was always a united front from my parents. I would have never guessed there was ever any conflict in their relationship. Of course, now that I'm an adult, certainly they have walked through their share of conflict as well. What's your perspective on that? Is it appropriate for our kids to see adults having those types of communication?
Yeah, I mean, I never saw conflict when it comes to communication growing up with my parents either. So on the one hand, yeah, it's nice because as children, it's scary, and it feels threatening when you see conflict between the two people that are supposed to be the anchors of your world, right? So I think it's good when people don't have negative, explosive, or combative conversations in front of their kids. That's a really bad, poor example to set. On the other hand,
that would be poor communication anyway.
Right, exactly. And then on the other hand, though, I also never saw like my mom speak up for something that she may not have agreed with. So I didn't grow up seeing that it was okay and healthy to express something that you might be bothered about or disagree with, because I never saw it modeled for me. So it took me well into my adult years to start to get comfortable going, I don't agree, or, we need to have a conversation, or, whatever, something that felt like, ugh, I really don't, I don't really want to talk about this. It's uncomfortable, but it took me a long time to get there. And I think a lot of it is because I never saw it. I didn't see it modeled with my grandmother and grandfather. It was just always whatever the grandfather or my father said or commented about or wanted to happen, whatever, that's just the way things went. And that's just, and I think like my grandmother and my mother sort of just went along, not rock the boat, keep the peace, avoid conflict. Well, avoiding conflict is not always a healthy thing. So I think it would have been better, as I know from my perspective as a child, to have been able to see and witness how they had a healthy conversation, and how if there were disagreements or, they were talking about different ways to handle a situation, it would have been nice to have seen that play out in a healthy, mutually respectful manner, so that I could have known that, okay, that's how this works. That's how you do this, rather than being, afraid and resistant to having those conversations.
So how do parents, when we're walking through these situations, how do you know when the communication is appropriate to be had in front of your children? I think a lot of times with people particularly in contentious relationships, but again, you sometimes don't know until somebody else sees it from the outside. How do you judge or gauge, like, this is a communication opportunity that can be had either, maybe even involving the kids versus this is something that needs to be tabled and we can hash this out a little bit later. How do you know? We all want to shield our kids from all kinds of things, but I am finding modeling is something that I think is lacking for a lot of parents my age. Things were not modeled to us as kids. So we're kind of trying to model things and probably doing a little bit too much of it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variables there because obviously, you have to take into consideration how old are your kids. What are they toddlers? Are they in elementary school? Are they high schoolers? So I mean, it really is going to come down to you really use some thoughtful, mature discernment, some good judgment here based on what the thing is that you are wanting to communicate about, and is it age appropriate? Clearly, it's not age appropriate to try to figure out a financial challenge in front of your 7-year-olds. They're just not ready for that, nor do they need to be involved in that. They're too immature. There's just no point in that, right? But when you have, let's say, 16-year-olds, they are much more aware of what's going on. They're much more aware of, what's being bought, what's not being bought. And so, and they should be learning about budgeting and the value of money and how you need to start working through navigating, the whole situation with finances. So I think in that sense, depending on what it is, it may be a situation where you just let them know. Maybe they don't have to be in on the whole conversation, but just letting them know, look, for example, maybe you've got to cut back on stuff for a while because maybe there's been a job change or, whatever reason, you need to make some changes. And those changes are obviously going to affect a little bit about their lifestyle. If it's going to impact them, or it's going to have an obvious impact on the family lifestyle, then you probably want to say, all right, this is why this is happening. So we're just going to have to make some adjustments while we navigate our way through this. Here's what our strategy is, or, here's how we hope to figure it out. And we really, we just want you to understand so that you don't feel like somehow you're being punished. I mean, I think, there's not one right answer, but I feel like taking into consideration the age appropriateness and how mature is your child, whether they're a kid, a teenager. Do you think that they are mature enough to get it? And then maybe, it's a effort, like, can you be on board with us? Here's what we're going to do. So that's just, that's one way to look at it. But it boils down to use your head and use good judgment and take those things into consideration.
That is helpful. I am going to take some offense to this being a deal breaker, though, Loree, because I myself am not a great communicator. And so I think disrespectful communication is a deal breaker, but we can figure out the communication piece.
Yeah. I mean, it just takes practice. You just got to work on it. And you got to make sure your partner's on board. It's hard if only one person is working on it. Communication, you're talking.
Absolutely. Right? I think if we have fundamentally different communication styles and the way that we communicate, this works for me, but it really bothers you, maybe then it's a deal breaker. But for me, I don't know. If my honey came home today and said, look, you're a bad communicator, I have to leave this relationship, I would just simply pass away.
Well, yeah, I would hate to see that happen. And hopefully, that hasn't been a red flag or you would already be gone. But,
we communicate pretty well.
Yeah, I know from personal experience, it has been an evolution. And I think that, Eric and I have come a long way because we do have different communication styles. We have very different communication styles. So he's had to work on being more patient and listening patiently, because I don't communicate like as linear as he does. It takes me, I have like puzzle pieces that I'm putting all together in some sort of sequence that isn't always in the right sequence, but eventually I get it out. So he's had to learn to patiently just stop talking and listen. And then, and I've had to learn that he likes to be able to, if he's going to communicate something, he likes to be able to say his piece without being interrupted or having somebody interject. So he's not like he doesn't like to have conversations that are sort of ping-ponging back and forth. He likes to be able to express a thought, complete a thought, and then okay, hand off to the other person. So it's just a slightly different style. And so we've had to learn that, through our many years together. It just is, it's just a process. But the main thing is both people want to.
Communication style sounds like, yes, this will be a future podcast topic, I believe. There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, next on the list, another very obvious addiction issues. So clearly, if you are with somebody that, has issues with substance abuse or gambling, other addictive behaviors, then naturally that's going to impact the relationship and the well-being of both partners. So, with if somebody is very committed to getting help and recovery, a lot of people are able to work through this if there's a strong commitment and willingness there. But if there's no commitment to that, then it's going to be a very rocky, unstable relationship. Trust will be broken, and it's all downhill. So kind of up there with abuse. It's just not going to work.
I totally agree. I totally agree. If a person is not able to choose you over whatever the addiction might be, then you're just delaying your inevitable heartbreak.
Yeah, or choose their own health and well-being over, the addiction. Yeah. Yeah. So, all right, here's one that I think a lot of people fail to look into early on is how compatible are your core values. So if you have some fundamental differences around values, like around family, if you're going to have a family, what does that look like? Finances, how do you manage your finances? Religion, is one person religious, the other is not? Or, you have two different religions, different values around lifestyle. So I think getting to know each other's core values so that you can navigate that and understand, are we going to, do we mesh well here? Or do we have differences that we need to figure out how do we respect each other's differences and still, make this work? Because that is possible, but you have to know what they are and you have to be willing to do that. But you got to really know what they are. Otherwise, there's going to be ongoing conflict about that. Because if you, and I think a lot of people don't get this, and they don't realize it till they're deep into the committed relationship, and then things start popping up that hadn't come up before, and you don't realize it until maybe you live together, or then maybe you have children. So having a conversation or recognizing what those are in each other is really important. Otherwise, you're going to have friction. Yeah.
So, do you have any advice for someone? Let's assume, because this was me. You're in a marriage, you're committed obviously to your spouse, and you have children. And you did not know what type of parent that person was going to be. Maybe we discussed it, but did I even know what type of parent I was going to be? I don't know. Until that, parenting is a heck of a thing to be able to predict how it's going to go. I think our marriage would have remained intact had it not been for our differences in parenting and our approaches to those relationships with our children. And do you have any advice for people who are in that situation right now, where the parenting relationship or that dynamic isn't going the way they thought it would, or the way they even discussed that it might.
Well, I mean, clearly, if you're coming into if both people in the relationship have not yet been parents, it's sort of hard to predict, until you're actually walking the walk and doing the thing, because there's so much that you cannot anticipate. You can be as prepared as you can possibly be, but there's just things about raising another human being that you don't anticipate, and you don't anticipate how you're both going to manage things when it gets dicey, when nobody's getting sleep, when there's issues. I mean, it's a little bit of a minefield that you really have to have faith, I think, that the two of you are strong enough with your values, your mutual respect, your level of personal responsibility, your commitment to the family. You really have to be. I think if you have those things are strong, they're intact, you'll get through all the stuff. I mean, billions of people have done it, and but I think that there are still some. I think there's still some red flags that you could see, that you might just want to be like talk about. If you have a partner that is a perpetual, maybe this person is a super like happy-go-lucky, chill, just no, not really, avoids kind of stress, avoids having to tackle anything that's too difficult, um, just wants to have an easy time of things, and everything should just be kind of fun. That would be something that I would be like, I want to think about this, because there's going to be a lot of sleepless nights if we start a family, and there's a lot of stress. It changes the entire dynamic of the relationship. Everything shifts hugely. So if you're
Absolutely.
with somebody that is not really big on change, or isn't really big on having a lot of responsibility heaped on their shoulders, that is something that I would be very mindful of, and think carefully about what kind of a partner they're going to be when there's the biggest responsibility that a person could possibly take on is the raising of another human. If you're not mature enough and ready to rise up to that challenge, that's maybe not somebody that you want to raise a child with.
It's scary. It's hard to predict. I had a kind of a thought recently. Some of the traits and characteristics that I recognized in my spouse at the time were things that I could accept. They were not deal breakers. Even if they got on my nerves, or I was like, I wish this were different, they were things that I chose to accept. And those are things at the time I could have said, hey, this is bugging me. I'm going to get in my car and go be by myself for a little bit. Now that I see some of those traits and characteristics in the small people I'm raising, I can't get away from those.
Right.
That is definitely something that I feel like my dad probably tried to tell me this in his own way. This is what he said when I was dating my then spouse. He would say, the things that you think are cute and funny now are the things that are going to drive you absolutely insane later. And I did not have any idea what he meant. And I think I'm starting to see it. The things that I can tolerate in your adult version are things that really bug me when I'm talking about our children. So,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
that was very insightful of your father. And that's true. I think that's something to that is somewhere on this list that rings a bell, because it's true. Early on in a relationship, those things that it's part of, it's just part of their charm, or it's just who they are, and
We all
we
have
all
our
have our
things,
things, right?
right?
Nobody's going to be 100% the perfect person for the other person. It's not our job to show up as a Stepford person, and and be able to show up 100% of the time the way the other person wants. but yeah, you do have to think about down the road, is this behavior something, do you want to live with that for the next however many, I mean, most people when they get married, they plan, I think, on staying married, right? Most people don't plan on getting a divorce. I'm sure there's a
Certainly.
few clever people out there, but whatever. That think they're going to be clever and use it more as a stepping stone. But for the most part, people are going to make that commitment and jump through those hoops because they intend that this is the person they're going to spend the rest of their life with. So then I think you go, well, all right, is this thing that it kind of bugs me now? I just have to, it's just a thing, but it's their character. Can I live with this for the next 50 years? Does this seem like a great idea? Do I want the children that we plan to have to be, brought up with this particular, habit or characteristic or what you might deem to be a character flaw? Is this something that I want them to be, exposed to or pick up on, or, take on as one of their own traits? So yeah, you got to think about those things, but obviously we don't think about those things. Again, back in the early stages of relationships, you're just really focused on everything that you love about this person. What do everything that's exciting. And
Sounds like we're seeking a perfect partner. He must be perfect.
yeah, well, I think it's kind of unfair what people sometimes are expecting out of that partner, because they want a partner to check so many boxes in order for them to feel like, okay, I can be happy with this person. This is the one for me. This is the perfect man or woman, whatever. And you're asking one single person to fulfill like dozens and dozens of needs that you think you have and want to have fulfilled in order to live a life that you feel good about. And it's a lot to put on another person. It's pretty rare that any one person is going to be able to check every single one of your boxes in order for you to feel like, okay, I can live with you. And it's not really meant to be like that. I think that one of the main purposes of being in relationships is so that when you do bump up against conflict, things that bother you, things that disturb you, then you can figure out what you need to do in order to navigate your way through this so that you grow as a person, so that you learn. If you never have to bump up against any challenges in life with anyone, then you're not really evolving. You just reach a point where if you don't have to ever figure out if maybe there's some ways that you can evolve or change or improve or make better decisions about, if there's never a cause for you to do that, then I think it's that would be very limiting, because it's, through the challenges and the hard stuff, and having to navigate your way through those things is what causes a person to grow and evolve and become hopefully a wiser, better version of themselves. So yeah, I think, I think if you have some of the main stuff down with someone, mutual respect and some of these things we're going through that you want to avoid, but you get the main stuff down, then together you navigate, this process of doing life together. And hopefully you both then become better people because of it, because of everything you go through, right?
That's right. The main stuff, the core
Core
values.
values. It's really important. So I think another thing to pay attention to is lack of emotional availability in your partner. So if you have a partner that's emotionally distant, if they're dismissive of your feelings, if they're not willing to be, vulnerable enough to be honest with you, that's going to lead to, you feeling a bit isolated emotionally, right? If you feel like you can't connect, your partner's not really interested in in being there for you on that level. So, emotional intimacy is pretty crucial for feeling like you have support and for any chance of a long-term, healthy, long-term connection.
I agree. How do you check yourself? Maybe you're heading toward a relationship and what you just said is standing out to somebody. How can you check yourself and say, hey, am I emotionally available for somebody?
Well, that's a good question. Well, you could certainly ask your partner. You know, I mean, we can flounder around and spend a lot of time trying to figure it out and guess. Or we could just simply communicate and say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm being, available and that you feel like you can talk to me about anything. Do you feel that I am? Or do you feel like maybe there's something I could work on here? How comfortable are you? Just ask. That's probably the shortest way to get to the answer rather than trying to guess. It's amazing how many people are trying to figure things out and guess and be psychic about what their partner's thinking or feeling when all you really have to do is say, hey, can we talk? I just have a couple of questions because I want to make sure, that you're feeling good about this aspect of our relationship. Is there something else that, I could be doing? Just ask.
I love that. Okay, good. Being able to communicate. We're back at that
Back
one.
to communication. And, the more you do things like that, the more comfortable it gets, the better it gets. And it's very freeing. And you don't have to feel like you're always trying to, be a psychic and figure it out. Just talk about it. Use your words.
Okay. Use your words. All right. What's the next deal
Okay, so the
breaker?
next one would be the obvious patterns of infidelity. So clearly, if a spouse is repeatedly cheating, they just can't remain faithful. Then there's going to be that's obviously an issue. You can't have a great committed relationship, a healthy relationship, if somebody is cheating on you, even if it's what do they call that, like an emotional affair. They just have a more intimate relationship with, another person that they feel like they can't have with you. That's not healthy for the relationship. And so, any type of betrayal like that is going to lead to trust issues, and then you're not going to have a healthy relationship. You have to have trust, and so that's not going to work, clearly. Thoughts?
Absolutely
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I have nothing to add. I
That's a
think you're
no-brainer.
right.
I mean, most people are not going to put up with that for long. And if they do decide to put up with it, they've accepted that they're willing to tolerate that, and they're going to live unhappily and unfulfilled in a partnership, which is too bad. But a lot of people do accept it because they're, maybe afraid to make a move or uncertain about what their options are, whatever. Okay, next one.
Well, let
Yeah.
me ask you this. If infidelity takes place one time in a relationship and the other person expresses regret and remorse and the couple decide to try to work through
Mhm.
that, do you think that changes the relationship permanently? Should it? Should we be on high alert at this point?
Well, I think I have, for me, my theory is that I believe that everyone deserves a second chance. People make mistakes. And I think that if someone, I think if it's not a pattern, it's different if it's a pattern of behavior. But if somebody just, they lost themselves, one time, they screwed up, they made a mistake, they fessed up to it, they have remorse, and they are committed to, making sure that doesn't happen again. I think that especially if you have children, because I feel like, when there's children, you want to try, you want to try everything that is, reasonable to make things work so that you don't break up the family. That's not always the case, and sometimes it's better to break it up. But if you can save it and everyone can be happy, I think that that's always plan A. That doesn't work, then you go to plan B. But I feel like if the one that's been betrayed is willing to give them a second chance, if they can then trust them without then punishing them, because a lot of times that happens. There's remorse, regret, there's an apology, and then the other partner accepts and says, okay, we'll stay together, we'll keep working on this. But they're pretty well, their ass is pretty chapped. So then they want to sort of bring it up and sort of digs and kind of punish the other person, even though they've said, okay, we'll work on it. So that's not going to work either. You have to be willing then, if you're going to say, okay, let's work on it, then, and give the second chance, then you can't be constantly beating up the person after you've said, let's try. I want to forgive you, which might take a little bit of time. But if you want to forgive and you want to trust and you want to give them a second chance, then you have to be committed to that as well. So I think it is possible. I think a lot of people, a lot of people screw up. People make mistakes. So I'm all for a second chance if it seems like the one that made the mistake is very sincere.
So you're not necessarily a believer that once a cheater, always a cheater.
No, I think that really does a disservice to people that just had like one fuck up. I just, and because sometimes that one thing and then the threat of what they've just compromised is enough to snap them into, whoa, I just risked everything I really don't want to risk. I made a huge mistake and I would be, I'm mortified that I risked this relationship or my family. I don't know what I was thinking, whatever. So I don't believe that once a cheater, always a cheater. Now, some people are, but not everyone. I think that's unfair.
Okay. Deal breaker is the pattern of infidelity.
I feel it's a pattern. And the other thing is, if you are just somebody that cannot, if you are unwilling to forgive, even if they were never going to do it again, even if they were so sincere, but you say, I can't, if you can't get past it and you can't forgive, then it's not going to work. So it takes both people, right?
Yeah, I do wonder if that would always be in the back of my mind. Like, he did this one time and I wonder if he would do it again, or I wonder if he still thinks about her. I think I'd have a really hard time getting past that.
I mean, some people can't get past it, and that's fair. I mean, it's kind of individual. So, but you can't. I think if you can't get past it, you can't stay in the relationship, because you will forever have resentment, and you will not trust, and you will be wondering, and you will torture yourself about it, and then it won't work. So, yeah,
not fair to anybody.
Yeah. All right. The next one is avoiding responsibility. So, if one partner is consistently blaming others, avoiding accountability, refusing to contribute equally to the relationship, that's going to be a deal breaker. A healthy partnership is going to require that both individuals take responsibility for their actions and the life that you want to share together. What does that look like? How is it going to play out? We're now there's you, there's me, and then there's us. So there's three entities here now. And so being responsible for ourselves and owning up to what we need to own up to, and taking into consideration, how we're going to contribute to the third entity, which is now the marriage or the relationship. You can't just only think about what works for you. So If you're trying to avoid any kind of responsibility that is healthy for the entity of the relationship or the marriage, then not going to work. There's going to be resentment. There's going to be conflict. So I think that's a big one. So, and that's something that you might be able to see early on in how the person handles their affairs in their personal life. You can see, do they, are they a responsible person? Do they have integrity? Because how they are now is how they're going to be when when you're in relationship together.
Absolutely. Like my dad said, it's amplified when you're in a committed relationship with someone. I also think a lot of women, and it's maybe just my bias because I am a woman and I understand my experience and have talked to other women mostly about this. It seems like some men maybe have their acts together when they're single. And then when they get into the marriage or the committed part of the relationship, that's when the woman realizes, oh, I've taken this man to raise. What is it about men that some of them, when they come into this type of relationship, all of a sudden they're less responsible? What is that?
Well, could be a lot of things again. I don't want to character assassinate every man out there that falls into that category. But I think, there are, first of all, what are her expectations? Are they reasonable? So if you have expectations that may not be super reasonable on the man, then that could be something that you need to look at yourself. And the other thing is what are his ideas around how to show up when you're now in a relationship with someone? Do you do you have to modify anything a little bit? Do you still behave like a bachelor? Do you now behave like, oh, this is just like when I was at home and my wife or girlfriend is not going to take care of everything like my mom did? We do have a lot of men out there that fall into the man-child category. Not all, but a lot. And so there might be, just depending on what was modeled for them growing up, they may not even realize that they have these expectations because that's just what they thought was normal. You move in and then all of a sudden there are certain responsibilities that the woman takes on and the guy continues on with life as he did before. So again, that comes back to being aware of each other's core values and the degree of personal responsibility, how you're going to contribute to the relationship. So it's another one of those things that you either can talk about, like, okay, we've been seeing each other and we're good. We want to build a life together. And maybe your first step is either moving in together or it's getting married and then moving in together, whatever. But it's one of those things. What is your expectation? Coming back to communication. Okay. How do you perceive that things will stay the same? How do you perceive that they will change? What are your expectations when we make this next move and enter this next phase? How do you see my role? How do you see your role? And talk about it. That way you'll know. If he says something that you're like
holding him to it.
Yes. Then you'll know. And then if there's something there that makes, that makes your spine straighten, you go, we need to talk about that because I see something different. So talk about it. Talk.
Absolutely.
Did I answer your question? Because I feel like I got sidetracked for a minute.
No, you certainly did. I think a lot of us are starting to call out in our relationships weaponized incompetence. So, for example, I moved into an existing home, and so the person I was living with, my husband. Well, just let me put him on blast for a minute. I moved into his house, so he was maintaining his home. He was doing his laundry. He lived alone, and he managed his household. And then we moved in together, and all of a sudden I'm responsible for his laundry and I'm taking care of his household. And, I think that's a fairly typical case. I think that happens in a lot of relationships, but some men will even take it a step further and will go on to say, well, I don't know how to do the laundry, and it's bullshit. You know how to do your own laundry. You can also step it on up and take care of mine too, where there's a necessary, scenario that you need to be doing everybody's laundry. You can do this. You can handle this. But I think a lot of times men will take not just men. I'm sure there are women who do it too, but they'll just take the easy out because there's somebody else who can handle this for me now. There's somebody else in my home to take care of things.
Yeah.
So weaponized incompetence.
And you know what? And maybe that's not a bad thing to hope for, depending on what your roles are. If you have more traditional roles where he's off working, 40 hours a week, and you're a stay-at-home mom, or you've agreed that you're not working right now, then why wouldn't you step up and contribute that way? And so, and that's fair. I mean, I just think there are times when somebody might just make an assumption that, okay, now that we're doing this, the other person's going to take on these responsibilities and I don't have to worry about it. So, it's, I think that you really have to have a sense of teamwork. It's because again, it's no longer just, it's not you and it's not me. It's, you don't want to lose your individuality. I'm not suggesting that, but there is now this third thing. There's the relationship or the marriage. That is another entity, and that is going to take contribution from both parties. It's going to take mutual support and respect and teamwork. And I see so many couples start out as a team when everything is just fun and not that serious. But then somehow, as challenges arise or unanticipated things, it was like, oh, we didn't plan for this. How do we figure this out? They divide into two camps. And once that happens, there's just, you're going to have some issues and you're going to have to work it out. But as long as, I think people lose sight of what's the goal. And if the goal is to have a long, healthy, happy, respectful relationship, then that means that you have to remain on the same team. You can't all of a sudden go, well, I'm all about me and this works better for me. And the other person is like, well, this is way too much on my shoulders. I mean, it's not going to work. The balance is, if the balance shifts so that one person feels like they're overly burdened for long periods of time, then again, you're going to have a crack in the foundation and there's going to be problems. So people lose sight of they're supposed to be on the same team and they lose sight of the target. But if you keep yourself focused, what's the goal? What's our target? What is our vision for our future? Okay, is the way we're behaving toward each other now conducive to getting there, to keeping our momentum going in that direction? Or are we kind of devolving into two camps and kind of starting to go, we've just lost sight of where we're going? And why are we going there? Right? So
absolutely. We need to be adaptable. Maybe that's the green flag. The deal maker is adaptability.
I love that you said that. Adaptability means survival. I mean, if you're not adapting in one way, shape, or form, somehow things are probably not going to be good for you. Now, that is not the same as always compromising what's in your, health and well-being interest. I don't mean that, but I do mean anytime two individuals are going to try to build a life together, some adaptability is going to be required. That's the only way it's going to work, because you're not clones of each other. That's just common sense. So you have to be willing to be, yes, adaptable and supportive, and have a little give and take. And sometimes things get off balance a little bit. Maybe somebody is going through a rough patch, with work, or a health issue or something, and one person is maybe overburdened for a period of time, but that's okay, because that's going to ebb and flow. But it can't be a new pattern that just sticks around for a long time. So I think that the next one would be if you recognize that the partner has unresolved anger issues. So, if you notice that this person has frequent outbursts, maybe aggression, a tendency to, even over small matters, kind of explode or make a big deal out of really not very significant things, that's a red flag. Obviously, if you're in relationship with a person like that, it's going to make you feel a little fearful, emotionally, probably like there's emotional instability in the relationship, because clearly anyone that's got having frequent outbursts, especially over small matters, is not emotionally mature or stable, and you don't want to feel like you have to walk on eggshells around someone for fear that it might strike them the wrong way and they're going to have an outburst. That is not healthy. And that's going to build resentment, and you don't want to live in a state of fear and feeling like you always have to watch what you say, or say it in the right way, or be afraid if you do or say something that's going to like trigger this person to have a tantrum, because that's what that is. If you're an adult and you're still having tantrums, you are emotionally immature, and you need to go get some help and figure your shit out, because that's just childish. And
Yeah, I refuse to be uncomfortable in a relationship, or emotionally uncomfortable in a relationship. I just won't do it at this point. What do you think about people, though, who may have a little bit of an impulse control issue, but who always come back around and apologize?
So let me ask you, because I think you probably will know how I'm going to answer that, and I will. But what do you think about people like that? Have you had that experience?
I have certainly had that experience. And it's one of those things I feel like if a person can recognize the error of their ways and can apologize, that's one thing. But if it's, as you have said, if in a few of these, a pattern, if it's a pattern, you don't apologize to me and then do it again and again and again and again. Apologize and let's address it. And then maybe we'll move on from here. But I've never been a fan of someone who just apologizes to smooth things over and then continues the behavior
Yeah.
beyond.
Yeah, because they're not really apologizing with the intention of examining their behavior and trying to change it. Like you say, they're apologizing to just smooth things over and get beyond it. So the apology will oftentimes indicate, you can read into the apology. I did a podcast. It was a couple of years ago now with someone. I forgot. Her name escapes me, but she did a great book called the 5 Languages of Apology, and you can kind of tell how sincere a person is and if they really mean it by the language they use in the apology. So I would be paying attention to that, and then obviously, the behavior says it all. No matter what they say, it's what. But what are they doing? And yes, if they're doing the same thing over and over, if there's a pattern, then you're either going to allow it, or you are going to say this needs to change, or this isn't going to work. And then you have some boundaries, and you are prepared then, if things don't change, to create your exit strategy, because
That's right.
nobody wants to live like that. But that's, yeah. I mean, the pattern and the behavior tells you everything you need to know.
I think some people use the apology as a manipulation tactic as
Sure.
well. And I like to think that most people don't. And most people, if they're going to humble themselves and apologize, that they mean it. But the follow through for me is in the change of behavior.
Right. Absolutely. Um, yeah, and some people may have good intentions, but they just can't follow through. They they
Huh.
just they're not willing to do the work they need to do on themselves, and so, or they'll blame you. Well, you made me
Mhm.
feel this way. You made me act this way. You made me do this thing or whatever. And that's again, that's avoiding responsibility. So that's not going to work either.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a deal breaker. Another
Yes, it
one,
is.
yeah. So different life goals. Now, this is something that seems obvious again, but I think sometimes people don't really think about this early on. But if you want fundamentally different things in life, like what if one partner wants children and the other partner doesn't, right? And that can happen if, if you've already been in a marriage or a relationship and one of the partners already has children and one doesn't.
Mhm.
So that can come up. So that's something that has to be definitely talked over. And is it a deal breaker? And that's fair because that's an important thing. Career ambitions, could require completely different lifestyles. I mean, let's say you meet after a few years of college and you meet the person you think is the love of your life, but your one person's goal is to, work on Wall Street. And one person's ambition and goals is to live off the land and live off the grid, then there's going to be like that's really two different, very different life goals that are going to be completely require different lifestyles. So, talking about what those larger things are, children, what kind of a lifestyle do you envision? Are you a minimalist? Do you want to live in a tiny house? Or are you somebody that
Mhm.
wants to live in the suburbs with a white picket fence? Do you want to live in a high rise in Manhattan? I mean, those are major things. So understanding each other's life goals is important. Lack of support for your growth. I think this is a huge one. Any partner that is going to discourage your personal growth, discourage you getting more education, advancing in your career if that's something that's important to you, or even just hobbies that interest you, that's not good. You have to be willing and excited to support the growth of your partner. If you are not willing to help your partner grow and experience the things they want to experience just for their own personal growth, then there's going to be resentment. A lot of people get into a very fearful state when they think their partner is growing because they assume the growth means somehow a loss for them, like they're going
Mhm.
to lose.
Outgrowing that person, right?
Yes, yes. And so, and that will happen. The partner will outgrow the other partner if the other partner isn't willing to be their biggest fan. As you know, that's something I've
Mhm.
talked about so many times, is that it's really important that each partner is the other person's biggest fan. You've got to cheer them on and want the things that they want for their own growth. If you can't do that and you try to sabotage that or dissuade or discourage, you're really trying to shut down your partner because of your own fears, and that's not cool. That's not cool at all.
Definitely not cool. Um, that kind of brings me to another conversation, I think. When you're choosing a partner, I think for a lot of us, we are looking at a person and that person's potential versus, do you are you taking a partner for who he or she is today versus who he or she could be or hopes to be or is working toward being. How do you differentiate there?
Good question. So, okay, so the So I think that's something that especially a lot of women are guilty of. Everything's great except these, a couple things, and he or she has so much potential. Um, he'll probably change. Okay. So you see potential, but is the other person seeing you just trying to change them?
Mm-hmm.
Just because you see potential in a person doesn't mean that they're the kind of person that is going to be ambitious enough to rise to their full potential. They may or may not, who knows? Some are, some will not. There's a lot of people that never even get close to rising to their potential. They're okay with mediocrity. They're okay
Mm-hmm.
with just status quo. But so the first mistake is, okay, they'll probably change. That's the first assumption you should not have. Might, probably not. Slow evolution, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
but but to bank on that, that's a pretty big gamble. All right. And I think a lot of times what happens too with couples, people in relationship, is they get to a point where they they like the idea of their partner the better than who he or she is actually showing themselves to be. So
Yes.
rather than seeing him or her as they are, as they're showing you they are, as they're
Mm-hmm.
demonstrating that they are, you have this idea of who they are and can be, and you like that idea so much more that you are going to hang on to the hope that they're going to bloom into that, to your idea, or you actually are making taking actions or saying things encouraging them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fine line there. But I think that most people get very hung up in their idea of what the spouse or partner is, and they don't really accept the reality of who they are.
That's right. Or they fill in the blanks. Here's an analogy that I love. When you're getting to know someone, the other person is a 1,000 piece puzzle. And when you first meet someone, you might have some of the edge pieces put together, but you're kind of visualizing what you expect the final product to be. And as you get to know people, more of those pieces get filled in. But also in your mind,
Mm.
you're completing the picture with very little information up front. So, yeah, I you
Yeah,
were talking about this, and that just came to my mind. I like to think of it that way.
yeah.
I also like to think the 1,000 piece puzzle. There's always a couple of pieces missing because you
Hmm.
don't 100% know anybody.
Right.
So that's how I approach getting to know a new person. You're always gonna like the picture when you don't see all of it,
I
because
love
in your
that.
mind you
Yeah.
see it a certain way, but as
Yeah.
the pieces start to come into place, you realize the hot air balloon is blue instead of green, and that's not
Right.
how I pictured that.
Yeah. Or the hot air balloon has a gigantic hole in it and it's falling, crashing to the ground.
We're leaping from the basket of the hot air balloon
Right.
at this point.
Yeah. All of a sudden, yeah, it's playing out a lot differently. I love that. I love that analogy. That's really good. But you're right. Yeah. You start filling in the blanks, the empty spaces with your ideas. And
Mm-hmm.
then, yeah, as time goes on and life plays itself out, it's not matching up with the picture that you've been creating in your mind. Super
That's right.
interesting. So, yeah, you really need to like the person in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
and be willing to accept them as they are, as long as there's not like major, terrible red flags and deal breakers, and not 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 let yourself fall into this sort of state of disillusionment about
Mm-hmm.
who they actually are, and is this actually the person that you are going to be great, moving through life with.
That's right. And maybe a lot of people have the best opportunity to reach their higher potential if they're with the right partner.
Absolutely.
And and maybe the potential that you think you see or you hope you see or that this person believes they can be, maybe none of that really matters until the partnership is correct.
Exactly. And that's the beauty, that's the opportunity that is in the relationship. That's the whole thing is, wow, this is an opportunity for each person to support each other's growth and moving into, that just evolving into something greater than who they are right now even. But it's got to be a kind of an organic thing for each partner. You can't force it, and you can't contort them into your idea of what that potential and what that growth looks like. But it's a beautiful opportunity. And, I have that thought all the time. I think, because Eric and I have been married for over 40 years. We've been together since we were in our 20s. And so I often think, oh, wow, if I had not met this man, I don't think I would be, I think I could have easily settled for the wrong person because he's been so supportive and encouraging and we have of each other. And I can't even imagine what my life would be like had we not been able to go through this whole amazing, these decades together, helping each other, supporting, becoming better people, just navigating our way through this. It's been such an extraordinary opportunity for our individual growth and for our the growth of the relationship. But you've got to be willing to weather the storms and the challenges too, and work through it. But the opportunity is beautiful if you don't have ridiculous expectations and you are not someone that's just into the idea that, well, if this just doesn't work out for me because I can't deal with it, then I'll just divorce. There's a time and a place for that, for sure, but I think people give up too easily. I think people are willing. We live in such a disposable society. Just toss it out, whatever it is, and get a new one. So I think sometimes you leave a lot on the table when you do that. People are looking for what's easy or what's the path of least resistance and what's the most comfortable. And that's not always in the best interest of your own growth and strength and wisdom. But
good stuff.
Yeah. So, okay, we got just a couple left here. Financial responsibility. This is another obvious one, right? I mean, if the person that you think you want to spend the rest of your life with is spending recklessly, doesn't manage their things well, if they're hiding debt from you, if they refuse to discuss financial matters with you, that's a red flag right there. Financial stress is, as most people I think know, the cause of most relationship breakups, marriage breakups, is they can't come to terms on the financial issues. So that's a biggie. You have to know what each other's values are around that, and how you manage things, because that can just burn the house down real quick.
Oh yeah. I'll add to that one too. I think when one person in the relation, obviously we're striving together. Once you're committed, we are a partnership. And if our partnership involves one person either taking a back seat in his or her career so that the other person can, relocate for a better opportunity, or someone needs to stay home and watch the kids, or someone has to become the breadwinner so that this one can go to grad school, or, whatever. I think you really have to discuss, okay, I'm going to decrease what I would typically choose for myself financially so that you can have this opportunity for your growth. But what does that look like for us down the line? I think those are conversations that people should be having as well, because in a lot of cases, like, unfortunately, the very common one is the stay-at-home mom who then finds herself wanting to get out of the relationship for one reason or another, and she can't.
Yeah. Just she feels financially trapped. Yeah. So for sure, that happens to a lot of people, and it is absolutely something that you really gotta get crystal clear on the plan. and both be willing to live up to the commitments you've made to each other with, regards to the plan, so that someone in the partnership doesn't end up with the short end of the stick, so to speak, feeling like they
Right.
don't have opportunity now that they thought they were going to have. Yeah, good point. So you know what? The very last thing is, don't ignore your gut instinct. I mean, all these things are, seem like they should be relatively obvious. But, we have all of these red flags and warning signs, but don't ignore your gut. If you consistently feel anxious, unhappy, somehow uneasy in the relationship, if there's just this little thing that is always kind of tapping at you and it keeps coming up, don't ignore that. That is your intuition or your gut telling you you need to pay attention to this. It might be something that you should be steering clear of in the worst case scenario, but at the very least, it's something that you need to lay it out on the table and say, I have a pretty big concern here that I want to talk to you about. You either bring it up, or, you might make something a lot more drawn out than you would have needed to had you not followed your gut instinct and taken some sort of action, whether it's, steering clear altogether or at least bringing up the conversation. So don't ignore that. That's a biggie.
I like that one. I think a lot of the relationships I was in, even more casual dating relationships, um, throughout my life, a lot of them felt like they were just happening and I was kind of participating, riding the wave, so to speak. And when you find yourself in a long-term relationship that you don't feel like you chose that relationship, that can be pretty jolting to kind of wake up from something like that. So I have adopted the principle now in relationships and in a lot of things in my life. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. I'm going to go into it full force and excited, or I'm having nothing to do with it anymore.
Well, I think that's serving you well. I think it's serving you well now, Lauren.
Thank you. I agree.
Yeah, because a lot of times I think, with decisions, people are, just so indecisive, or they're on the fence. They don't know. They're second guessing. They're overthinking. They're, overanalyzing. What is that saying? And paralysis by analysis or something like that. And I think you're right. Sometimes it just comes down to, is it a hell yes? And if it's not, then maybe it just means it's not, or it's at least not now.
Right. Okay, well, this brings me to something I wanted to run by you as my life coach.
Okay.
I'm in a situation. So I also think when you get in this pattern with a specific person of letting that person kind of call the shots and control the relationship, it's very hard to break out of that, even when the relationship is not what it was before. So I'm going to need you to put on your coaching hat for me, Loree,
Yes.
because I am making plans this weekend. So a little context, you already know this about me. I used to live in a different city, and it is one of my favorite cities. And now I'm a couple hours away from that city, but my ex is still there. My children still visit, and I'm close enough, and it's my favorite city. So I had planned to actually go this weekend and go visit this particular city. And I was going to allow the girls to hang out with their dad for the day. And I was just going to kind of kick it around, go to one of my favorite restaurants for lunch, that kind of thing. As I'm thinking this through in my own mind and had not voiced this plan to anyone, he then says, hey, why don't you bring the girls up and let's get dinner together? Well, I then said, by the way, I don't think we're in a place to be getting dinner together. I think we're on two very different pages about the implications of dinner together. I am in a relationship full on living with somebody else. So, dinner together to me is like, we're doing this for our kids. I don't exactly know what his intentions would be on dinner together, but I do think in his mind, there's still some level of competition, and he refuses to have lost me to this other person. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a little context.
Okay.
So my plan to go to a Korean barbecue restaurant, I said, sure, bring the kids. This is where I'm going. This is where my lunch is going to be when I visit your city. Since then, though, the conversation has turned, and my ex has now asked me to go to dinner at a different restaurant and has told our children he's making reservations. And I just feel like you're hijacking my plans.
Uh-huh.
So, how do I approach this, Loree? Do I say, hey, my plan was this, and I invited you to be a part of that, even though I probably wouldn't have invited him to be a part of that had he not invited me to dinner? So, by accepting that invitation and bringing him along to my meal, was I opening myself up to this whole other thing? And what message does it send if I just go along with the flow and go to his reservation?
Yeah. Okay. Um, so I would ask you, um, how long were you in a relationship with your ex?
We were, so divorce can be messy, right? Divorce can be drawn out. I would say that,
Roughly.
yeah, I feel like that door closed about 8 years into the marriage.
Okay, so the answer is you've known this man for a solid 8 years.
Oh, I've known this man for 13 years.
Okay, you've known him and you've been in a relationship of some sort with him then for over a decade, a long time.
Right.
You feel
Yes.
like you know him pretty well?
Yes.
Okay, so what does your intuition tell you about his maneuvering of your day on Saturday?
I think if I were to agree to his plans, he
Nope,
would
stop.
read that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Stop for a second. What does your intuition, though, tell you? I'm looking for something a little more less analytical. Not, I think.
Okay,
Okay.
my intuition is telling me a dodge and avoid and don't have a meal with this person at all.
Mm-hmm.
That I was trying to be nice by inviting him
Right.
to be a part of my plan,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
we're just not on the same page.
Right. And your intuition would tell you that because what do you know about him? What is his pattern?
His pattern is that he interprets things his own way, and he reads into things very differently, and he tries to control situations.
Mm-hmm. So did he try to just, as in your words, he hijacked the day and controlled it by rearranging it and making other plans?
Yes, that's what he intends to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you recognize that as that's what he's always done.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So given the pattern, given what you know about him, given the plans that you were looking forward to that you had, and given the fact that you are in a happy, committed relationship with someone else, what do you think is in your best interest?
Absolutely in my best interest to proceed with my plan by myself and go to Korean barbecue.
Okay.
Alone.
And that does not prohibit him in any way of being able to spend time with his daughters, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So are you feeling like you need more guidance on this, or do you think you know what you really feel you should do that's in your best interest?
I definitely have some clarity here. It always works this way when I talk to you about these things that are so abundantly obvious. I do wonder though why I fall into these same habits with this particular person when in my current relationship I have much more authority and confidence to say, no, I'm not going to a steakhouse with you. This is what I'm doing, and I'm graciously inviting you, but if you don't want to be a part of this specific plan, please don't be. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? I feel like I'd have that conversation in my current relationship very easily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for whatever reason with this other one, I still really struggle to kind of assert myself in that way, and I don't know why, because I no longer really owe him anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what he's entitled to is the time that you've agreed on that he gets to have with his children, and he gets
Mhm.
that. But he's not entitled to more of your time. You, you know him well enough to know his pattern, but it you have a pattern too, to the point you just made. Why do I
Mhm.
always blah, blah, blah when it comes to this man? So, this is your opportunity to recognize your own pattern that you fall into, you know, which is predicated on the scenario that he starts to manipulate. And then you go, well, maybe it's, I just want to avoid conflict. Maybe it's, I don't want to hurt his feelings.
Mhm.
Maybe it's, could be a combination of those things or other things. And it could just simply be that before you responded to him, maybe before you thought deeply enough about it to go, is this really what I want? Or is this just me, reacting in because this is the dynamic that's played out with us for so many years? It's the pattern. So,
Mhm.
do you want to break the pattern?
Absolutely. I need to break this pattern.
Okay. So, what are you going to do then regarding tomorrow, Saturday?
Well, I'm going to go and deliver his children to him and have my Korean barbecue for lunch. Do I continue to extend that invitation to him, though, of, hey, if you want to spend some time that you're not entitled to spend with me, you're still welcome to come? Or do I draw a line and say, no, like you tried to overstep the boundary, and now you're not invited anymore?
Well, it's, I don't know. There's a couple ways to look at that. On the one hand, you
I do hope ultimately that we get to a place where we are
exactly.
more friendly to each other
Yes.
and we can do things with our kids together.
Right.
But I don't think he's ready for that.
Yeah. So that's the thing. I think you have to use your judgment. You know him very well, and you know a lot of how he thinks, and what he ultimately wants. So I think you just have to use your judgment. Yes, you do. You're entitled to boundaries. You also want to, have a goal, hopefully, of being able to have a friendship and a mutually respectful relationship, because you are parenting the same children and that's not going to change, right? So
Mhm.
you don't want to have conflict there. If you can avoid that, you want to have a harmonious relationship. That's the goal. Since you did invite him to join you for lunch, not have him make dinner plans, if you feel like, okay, I could compromise a little bit there, and you could just say, I'm going to stick with my original plan. So I'll be at this restaurant at this time. We can spend about an hour or whatever and have lunch, and then you can go do what you're going to do with the girls, and I'm going to go do my thing. The person that you said you are now is, being able to have agency to be assertive and state what you want. So this is an opportunity for you to exercise that.
Yay.
Yeah.
I love an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And it still doesn't cut him out completely, but you're the one that now is staying in control, as opposed to acquiescing every the day
Mhm.
to what he's decided your day needs to look like, what he
Mhm.
wants it to be like.
Okay.
Right? Because if you did that, you would be resentful. You'd be like,
Right.
why did I do this? I didn't want to do this. I don't want to be here. You would be kind of mad at yourself because you would have let yourself down.
This has happened many times, many, many, many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think your idea of maybe I just do that seems, if it's more of a comfortable fit for you, if you feel better about yourself, and nothing is taken from the girls or from him, I think it sounds like a win-win.
Okay. Dealbreaker is a guy who hears you want Korean barbecue and makes reservations at an American steakhouse.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't really concerned about what you wanted.
No, but I'm glad. I'm really glad, because if he had said, "Hey, Korean barbecue sounds great. I'll meet you there," then he still comes in with whatever his preconceived notions are, and I don't really have an out at that point to say, "Well, no, you're changing the plan in terms of literally where we're going to eat," even though I also know that his plan for the outcome of the gathering is a very different thing than what my plan would be.
Yeah. So you get a hold of your plan, reclaim your plan, and use your new tools, and see how it plays out.
I look forward to updating you on this situation.
I look forward to hearing about it.
I'll be accountable.
Let's talk about it on the next show. Let's see
That sounds good.
how Lauren's Saturday plays out.
Yikes.
All right. So I think just a quick takeaway for everyone, on what we talked about today is really just look, if you're in a relationship, just a few things to remember and to reflect on. Are you safe physically, emotionally, all of that? Do you have shared values? Is there mutual respect and mutual trust? Is there shared responsibility? Is there a strong loyalty toward each other and toward the relationship and the future that you are committing to? And are you each other's biggest fan? So I think if just keeping some of those things in mind and asking yourself if you are being those things for your partner, if they're being that for you, do a little deep dig on yourself and your own behavior and how you're viewing your partner, and pay attention to, how he's treating you, and he or she, I should say. And then, if you feel like you need to communicate about a few things, then don't hesitate to bring it up. You should be able to bring things up without fear of repercussions or negative, a negative reaction. So I think that's going to do it for us today. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us. This was really fun. I'm super excited to have the next show and hear all about Lauren's Saturday. And we hope you found this conversation valuable and inspiring.
Absolutely. We'll have some resources for you in the show notes. You can find us, Loree Bischoff and Lauren Young, on YouTube and Instagram. Join our community as well on Facebook. It's the We're Talking Shift group. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening now, and catch us next time on We're Talking Shift.
All right, until next time, stay feisty, friends, and go make some epic shifts happen in your lives. See ya.